Hey guys, this is John, and I'm on LeeChess.org solving some tactics once again. It's been about a month since my last tactics trainer video, which was very well received. So I figured I'm going to keep the same format. I'm going to do 5 puzzles on each mode of difficulty here on the LeeChess tactics training module. We'll start out with easy and we'll work our way up to hard. So 15 problems. Let's see if we can knock them out. Okay, so first puzzle, black has just played rook takes c2. I notice that black is threatening queen takes f2, king h1, queen takes g2, checkmate. But we have a nice little battery of our own here. We have queen and bishop bearing down on the black king along this diagonal. Yeah, this is a pattern that just jumps out right away. I've seen it many, many times, as has, I think, pretty much any experienced chess player. So I can play queen takes g7 check. And after queen takes g7, we do not have to take the black queen. The black queen would be pinned. We can instead play rook d8 check. And the queen is stuck, so it can't block on either f8 or g8. Black would instead have to play bishop f8, after which we can exploit the pin once again and play rook takes f8, and that's checkmate. So let's go ahead and do that. Black must take, and then we have this check. Yep, bishop f8, only move, and take. So this is a nice pattern to know involving the pin. And you might arrive at it, if you've never seen this pattern before, in a different way. You might look at rook d8 check first, which actually also works. You could play rook d8 to begin with, and after they block with the bishop, then you can play queen takes g7. So that's another move order that would work out. It maybe is a little bit less accurate because I guess it gives black more options, but rook d8, black could play like queen f8 or queen g8, although queen takes g7 is still mate, so it's equivalent. Let me try something real quick. If I click the little analysis button, okay, so I can actually play around with the moves if I want to. So yeah, this move order would also work, checking right away. And same type of thing, bishop f8, queen takes g7, queen takes, and then rook takes f8, checkmate. Okay, let me go back, and we're doing easy again. This is the second problem. So black has just played rook f8. Find the best move for white. So black's pawn is on the verge of queening. We could sacrifice our rook for the pawn, but with these scattered 3 pawns, I don't like our chances against the black king and the rook. So we could move this rook somewhere along the g-file without sacrificing for the pawn, but he'll just be queening next move. And it's inevitable that we'll have to give up our rook for the queen. So what we can do is we can take the rook, allow black to queen, but then we give a check on h8. And in doing so, you force the black king to the g-file, after which we can play rook g8 and skewer them, and then take the queen on g1, and we'll be left with 3 extra pawns in an easily winning position. So rook takes f8, a forcing move. We would be remiss in not looking at that. So then we give this check, the crucial move, and set up the skewer. We can just take the queen. So yeah, nice little puzzle. Black was clearly trying to use a deflection idea in order to save the game, but it looks like the rook was on f7 a moment ago. They should not have played that move. I guess they should have just queened right away. Yeah, probably just go for the queen. The other cool thing is you can see, by clicking this little eye icon, you can see which game this came out of. So we can see right here, and here's the engine analysis. So yeah, apparently in the game, black was pushing their luck with rook f8, and that was a big blunder. Yeah, queening immediately was the better move. g1 queen, after which white can give some checks, but eventually we'll have to give up the rook for the queen, and I think black should win this. It's still a bit unclear just because of white's king being able to assist the pawns for now, but it should be a win for black. Okay, so let's go to the third problem now. Go back to easy mode. Ooh, f5. That looks like a very dangerous move. And if you're able to see right away why f5 puts black in dire straits just right off the bat, then kudos to you. And it's because of this bishop on c4. I've said in previous videos, the f pawn stands for forget about it. Especially early on in the game, you want to forget about moving that pawn because it can lead to disaster very quickly. So naturally, with this bishop on c4 only being blocked by white's knight, we want to look at knight moves to try to get at black's king. And two knight moves stand out, knight e7 check and knight f6 check. Why do those two knight moves stand out above all else? Well, they're double check. If we play a knight to e7 or f6, it's a double check. Both the white knight and the white bishop would be checking the black king. And whenever it's double check, you have to move the king. So already I see that as a way to peer into the future pretty reliably. We know if we give double check, they have to move their king. That's a forcing line we can follow. Now, if we play knight f6 double check, king h8, knight g6 is nearly checkmate, if not for the h-pawn. But if we take that line a bit further, so knight g6 check, h takes g6, we notice that the h column, the h file, is open. So we have queen h4 checkmate there. Once again, that line from the beginning is knight f6 double check, king h8 forced, knight g6 check. And the black king has nowhere to run. He must take the knight on g6, after which queen h4 check is checkmate as well. You know, that line would definitely be sufficient for me to just go for it. There's no way black can get out of that sequence. But it's interesting to compare knight e7 to. If knight e7 double check, then king h8. We could put a knight on g6. That actually also works. We could play knight 5 to g6 check, pawn takes g6 and queen h4, and all the essential elements of the combination are the same. So it's just either one, as long as you follow with knight g6 on the next move. And it's not even worth looking at other moves, because this is just a checkmate in, what, 3 moves? And it's not worth looking at knight b6 or knight takes c7, trying to go after the rook in the corner. It's not worth looking at queen moves. You see a forced checkmate, just go for it. So let's go for the first line that I mentioned. Nor is it worth looking at like knight f7. Yeah, it's a nice looking move, but he can play rook takes f7. Knight g6 is just a straightforward victory. Okay, let's go to the next one. Continue training. Problem number 4 on the easy problems. Black has just played knight takes f2, so black's queen is x-raying white's king. He wants to move the knight and get a discovered attack. Looking at our own threat, since knight takes f2 is not a check, you know, rook takes a6 just jumps immediately to mind. After pawn takes a6, queen takes a6 check, king b8. Do we have enough firepower to really trouble black? Probably we don't have a mate there. Queen b6 check. If king c8, then queen c7 is mate, but he has king a8 instead. Actually, I think we do have a mate. Let me tell you from the beginning. So we're just following a forced line. The very first line that jumped out at me. Rook takes a6, b takes a6, queen takes a6 check, king b8, queen b6 check. He can't go to c8 because of queen c7 mate. So king a8, then queen c6. And no matter where he puts his king, whether it's a7 or b8 at that point, our bishop will be able to join the attacking equation. So say king b8, we have bishop c7. And if he goes king c8, then we have a discovered attack. For instance, bishop b6 check, taking away the d8 square from the king. So king b8 would be forced. And then we have a mate in 2. Queen c7 check, king a8, queen a7 mate. Let me go through another line in this sequence. So from the top here, rook takes a6 check, b takes a6, queen takes a6 check, king b8, queen b6 check, king a8, queen c6 check. We looked at king b8 a second ago, so if king a7 instead, bishop b6, crucial move, the bishop joins the attack again. King b8 will transpose to the last line with queen c7 check, king a8, queen a7 mate. So after bishop b6, he has to play king a6. But then I think bishop c5 should do the trick. Bishop c5 check, forcing the king forward to a5. And I think at that point we have b3 mate, in fact. Or sorry, not b3 mate. Queen b6 check, king a4, and then b3 mate, or queen b4 mate, or queen a6 mate. There's a lot of mates. So that looks good. The only loose end that we'd want to tie up before embarking on this is if rook takes a6 check. What if he doesn't take the rook? He could play king b8, but that will be defeated by queen d6 check. And then after king c8, we have queen c7 mate or rook a8 mate. So I see a straightforward line that seems to win in all variations, so I'm going to go for it. I'm not worried about black's threats over here because everything I'm doing here is with check. Oh, I fail. Okay, I'm guessing the solution is queen c6. So I can just do this a little bit faster. Um, yeah, queen c6, I bet, is the move. Okay, so it's letting me do a little take back here. Yeah, and then this check. And it's the same mechanism. And here I can just do a discovered attack with the bishop. For instance, bishop b6 check. Force the king back to the corner. Yeah, and we pull off the checkmate. I like that puzzle because even though the line I gave is winning, it wasn't the most efficient way to win. Let's go back and take a look at that, actually. I wonder if I can put on the analysis. Actually flip the board. That's interesting. So let's say in the event of this move, and I was giving take. If I can flip that back, that's weird that it did that. But after king b8, queen b6, it's going to be the same thing. Like I said, king here just runs into queen c7 checkmate, and after king a8, queen c6, there's no pawn on a6, and it's taken a couple more moves, but it'll still be the same type of checkmate. Let's say king a7, then we check here. If king b8, we have check and then checkmate. So let's assume king a6, and I mentioned I think bishop c5 was the move I was looking at here. Check king a4, and then we have queen a6 checkmate, or b3 checkmate, queen b4 checkmate. Pick your poison. Okay, that was problem number 4, I believe. So let's go to the last easy problem. Okay, so white has just played queen c2. Lots of pieces on the board in this one. Black to move. Okay, so this pawn on e3 looks overloaded to me. And what I mean by that is it's trying to defend the pawn on d4, which is in danger from this knight. And it's also trying to monitor this f4 square. There's nothing on f4, but the black knight has access to that square. It could jump in there. So knowing that, the two moves that I look at right away are either knight takes d4 check or knight f4 check. Now at this point, once I've narrowed it down to those two moves, it's just determining which one is best. So if I play knight takes d4 check, they take with the pawn. If I then continue with knight f4, trying to fork the king and the bishop, then bishop takes f4 is the refutation. So I don't like that. Instead, if I start with knight f4 check, he can't ignore the knight, because if the king moves, then like we're taking on d3. Check, thanks to our bishop also joining the attack. So knight f4 check, they must take with the pawn, after which knight takes d4 check. There's nothing remaining to defend that square, and it's just a fork on the king and the queen. So I'm pretty sure knight f4 is the solution. Just quickly scanning to see if there's anything else, like, you know, inserting bishop takes d3 or some other move. But yeah, I don't really see it. Because if we insert bishop takes d3, then queen takes, and then knight f4, e takes f4, knight takes d4 would not be a fork anymore. So let's execute that one. Yeah, and we're going to win the queen. Just go take this guy. All right. Let me go on to the normal problems now. So we've knocked out 5 of the easy ones. On to the normal problems. All right, so black to move. White has just played queen c3, lining up with our king. We have a lot of pieces in the vicinity of white's king. But is there a knockout? Okay, this h2 pawn is clearly a target. Our queen is currently attacking it. You know, we might look at ways for our knight to join, like knight f3, trying to double attack that, but he's got 2 pieces defending the f3 square. Our rook, on the other hand, can go to h4, ganging up on the pawn on h2. And the point is, by virtue of that last move, queen c3, they have their queen on an undefended square. It is menacing, like attacking our king, x-raying our king down the c-file, but it is undefended. So by playing rook h4, we take advantage of that, threatening mate. And if g takes h4, the queen on c3 hangs. So barring some other very strong continuation, that is what I would go with as black. There's no checks that are going to disrupt our combination. And there's not enough pressure on c7 yet. Bishop g4 check makes no sense after rook h4. So let's do this. Yeah, and then just take this queen. and we're up a decisive amount of material. So nifty pin idea on that g3 pawn. Okay, let's continue. Ooh, okay. We have the dreaded king, knight, and bishop versus king checkmate. This would be a good chance to show my ignorance of this checkmate if I did indeed have no idea how to do this checkmate, which is considered to be one of the more difficult theoretical positions to execute in chess. Much harder than king and two bishops versus king. So the thing about king, bishop, and knight versus king is that you can only checkmate your opponent in the same color corner as the bishop that you possess. So for black, you have to checkmate either on h8 or a1 in this case. And it's nice that the white king is already pretty close to h8. There's maybe I'll do a future video on how to do this checkmate, but there's a technique you can use to basically compel the king to go into one of these corners, whichever corner of your bishop. So how do we do this most efficiently here? This is kind of an odd position to make a tactics puzzle, but leads me to believe there's some sort of forced checkmate coming up. So we want to try to like make the king march over here. If we start with knight g3, trying to take away the h5 square, they must go to h7. And then, I don't know, king, Because then they can try to come to g8 and sneak out this way. So maybe knight g3 is not the best starting move. So if knight g3, king h7, king f6, let's say, king g8. I mean, we can play king e7 and make sure they can't come to f8. But that's already a lot of moves. I'm thinking it's something shorter. How best to stop them from escaping up the board? We could try knight f6 and allow king to g7, but then they're getting to f7. What other options do we have? We have king moves, but again, I mean, king f6 would be a pretty safe move, actually, because after, oh, no, it wouldn't. King h5, and then both of these squares are accessible to the white king on the next move. I was thinking I could play bishop g3 and take away the h4 square, but skips to g4. See, the reason why I'm struggling on this is the technique that you use, the so-called driving technique, to get the king to the corner that you want, it doesn't produce a position like this usually. So this is like kind of outside my realm of knowledge. Like I wouldn't use this technique to get to this position, is what I'm saying. Let me think here. So again, I'm going back to this knight g3 move. Knight g3, king h7. Let's say king e6 in that case. King g8. Don't like that he's getting out through that f8 square in a lot of cases. Weird. Okay. I mean, I'd love to play king f6 in order to stop, you know, like him sneaking around the outside, like king f6, king h7, king f7. But that's not right. I mean, king f6, king h5. That's what he could do. How best to rearrange our forces? Knight g5, maybe? Maybe knight g5 is the key. Yeah, okay. So if knight g5, then he can't go to h7 or g7. So paradoxically, we're actually pushing him back to h5. But then I can take away the flight square. So he's trying to escape to h4. So we go bishop g3, force him back to h6, and then king f6. And he would then, or wait a second, let me say that again from the beginning. So knight g5, king h5, bishop g3, king h6. I guess knight f7 check? No. I guess knight e6 then. Yeah, and we're kind of doing like this W technique. Okay, I'm going to try to rehash this from the beginning because I keep confusing myself. You see why I said this checkmate is hard sometimes? Okay. Yeah, knight g5, king h5, bishop g3, king h6, and then knight e6, I think is the key. Stopping king g7. And then if he plays king h5, I'll just play a waiting move like bishop f2. Trying to... Or actually king h5 I can play knight g2 check. Yeah, that's what I can do. Knight g2 check. And then he can't go to h4 or g4, so you'd have to go back to h6 and then king f6, and we're eventually going to mate. Okay, so I'm just going to play this. Puzzle failed. Okay. All right. You got to show me the answer on this one. Where is it? Oh, it's just this. Knight g3. Okay, so take away the h5 square. So this is the first move that I thought about. King f6 here. Bishop here. Okay, king h8. Yeah, I don't know how well this makes for like a tactical puzzle though. I mean, it's kind of useful, I guess, but not sure it's the greatest for a pure tactics puzzle. Let me show you what I was thinking about. So from this position, knight g5, king here, and then bishop g3, taking away that flight square, and then king here, and then knight e6. And then after king h5, because again, white wants to stay away from this h8 corner, check here, and then here. And after king here, king f7, king h6, we have check. And we're like systematically taking away all these squares that the white king can possibly flee to. And then after king h7, let's say, I think knight e6 would be fine, king here. And now we're close to checkmate. We can make a waiting move like bishop e3. Here, knight f8 check, king here, and then finally bishop checkmate. So that's how I would do it, according to my understanding of this. But knight g3, I mean, I definitely see the value of that too. So sorry we got hung up on that problem for so long, but it's still interesting to try to hash it out and find the most efficient checkmate. Let's go to the next one. All right, we'll give up on that one. Continue training. Is this number 3, I believe? All right, so bishop d5 was played. Black to move. The pawn on h2 is hanging. We could just chop that pawn off if we wanted. Would force king e3. And then the rook on e5 is hanging. And black would be up a piece at that point, but I guess white's king is skipping away here. King d2. Then we have knight takes f3, interestingly. So from the beginning, queen takes h2, king e3 forced, queen takes e5 check, king d2, and then knight takes f3 check. And if bishop takes f3, we win their queen. If from the beginning, queen takes h2, king e3, queen takes e5, king f2, then it might be a slightly different story. And it still looks fantastic for black. Maybe then we go back to h2 check, king e3, and then play like rook e8 check. I guess they can block on e4. Oh, there's also knight g2 check, isn't there? So let's say queen takes h2 check, king e3, queen takes e5, king f2, queen h2 check again, king e3, and then there's knight g2 check, forking the king and the rook on e1. So that would do the trick. All right, so that looks promising. Is there anything stronger? I mean, there's queen d2 check at the beginning, but he can just block with a rook, like rook 5 to e2, for instance. So yeah, I think I'm liking queen takes h2. Okay, so let's try it. Queen takes h2. I think taking this is just good. Yeah, and now this was the intended follow-up. We take the queen. Okay. Two more of these, and then we will move on. White to move. Oh, I've seen this one before. So black just captures the pawn on e4, attacking the bishop. Now, we could move this bishop, but if you notice, the possibility of knight c7 is very tempting. And the only thing standing in our way is this queen. So at that point, once we notice that, we should look at ways to deflect black's queen. And some ways are like b4. But I think it's even stronger to offer our queen, queen a4. So saying take me, because if he does, knight c7 is checkmate. The bishop and knight combine for the checkmate. And queen a4 has the added benefit of also attacking the knight on e4 compared to b4. So after queen a4, I don't think there's any defense for black that doesn't involve just horrendous loss of material, like, you know, knight takes g5, queen takes a5. So this is a pretty straightforward deflection tactic. And white wins. Okay, let's do one more, and then we'll move on to the hard problems. Knight takes g3 was played. So here, we could make an autopilot recapture and just play like h takes g3, maybe operating on the premise that our rook will be useful in attacking down the h-file. But areas where people often miss moves are when their opponent captures a piece, and you just assume that you have to recapture. And this is a position where a tactics trainer doesn't really do it justice, because you're already going to be skeptical about a simple recapture in this position if you're solving it as a tactic. So you're going to be looking for other moves. But I would hope in a game we'd be able to see this move, queen check, exploiting the pin on the f7 pawn, forcing king here. And now we can pick up this pawn with check. Yep, force the king over. We exploit the pin once again. And finally, we have this capture with checkmate. So good example of in-between move. And most likely black, in playing this last move, knight takes g3, was not looking at queen g6. And I wonder if white found it in the game. Let's see. Let's see if we can look at the game. Oh, yeah, you see in the game between these two players that white actually just did take back, but missed that forced checkmate starting with queen g6. And according to the engine, black is better after this. So that was a pretty costly mistake. And black went on to win this game from the looks of it. Okay, now let's move to the hard problems. Queen d7, guarding against queen takes f7 checkmate. It is white to move. So this queen is a prime candidate for a deflection idea. Bishop e6 is a move that looks incredibly tempting just right away, because if queen takes e6, note that f takes is illegal because of the queen here. If queen takes e6, then knight takes c7 is the reply, forking the king and the queen. So bishop e6, I think the only legitimate move for black is queen e7 at that point, trying to remain defending this pawn. Bishop g5 could be a follow-up, attacking the queen and trying to force it to take on e6. They do have g6 then, though. So what happens in that case? It's getting messy. Bishop e6, queen e7, bishop g5, g6, attacking our queen. I guess we could just move the queen back, right? Queen h4. And our queen remains defending the bishop. We're attacking black's queen on e7. They still can't take on e6 because of knight takes c7. If pawn f6, we just take on f6. So that looks good. And note that if bishop e6 to start, black can't play g6 right away because we play bishop takes g7 with check. It's a crucial detail. Yeah, I'm going to go for this. Oh, and actually take it, but yeah, this is just winning black's queen now. So I do believe the more interesting move, if I toggle to the analysis here, would have been... Oh, okay. I have to go back for a second. Sorry, I lost that puzzle. Can I click on this? Recently played puzzles. Yeah, so the more interesting move would have been queen e7 in that case. We'll just play this out again just so I can get to the solution. So go back here. So if queen e7, I was planning on this move, bishop g5, once again attacking the queen. And it's running out of squares. f6 cannot be played because of the f-pawn being pinned. So I was looking at g6, trying to counterattack. But then I think just queen h4 is good. And again, the queen is, completely ensnared, essentially. If queen takes, then knight takes e7. And if f6, just bishop takes f6. Game over. All right, moving on. Continue. So king c3 was played here. Black is down a lot of material. White's up, what, a piece, 2 pieces? Knight into rook, essentially. Black has a bunch of pawns, but... So this is probably going to be some sort of mating net. King c3. So looking at checks immediately, queen e3 jumps out because that would force the king to b4. And then how to follow up? If queen c5, king b3, and I think white is safe. So what about pawn c5 check instead? So queen e3, king b4, pawn c5 check, king a4. We are tantalizingly close to mate. But if b5 check king here, going at this bishop, then we have, we don't have queen e6. They guard the e6 square. That's a shame. I want to get to the b6 square so I can checkmate them with their king on a5. How do we accomplish that? So queen e3, king b4, c5 check, king here. What else can we throw in? I mean, just looking at the forcing moves, b5 check, king a5. Is there some sort of quiet move we can do? Maybe queen h6. That is sneaky. So trying to get to b6 once again. It's a slow move, but there's no back rank checkmate. And I don't see a defense for white. I mean, he can interpose with the queen, like on these squares or with the bishop on c6, but I capture everything with my queen. So once again, that's queen e3 check, king b4, c5 check, king a4, b5 check, king a5. This is all pretty easy to calculate because it's completely forced. And then this quiet move, queen h6, since queen e6 will not do due to the trade. So queen h6. Yeah, and I don't see a defense to queen b6 checkmate. We're defending our bishop, and our pawns do an excellent job of guarding all of those squares, taking away opportunities for the white king to retreat to safety. And the white queen can't move anywhere to help defend b6. It's not in range of that square. Okay, looks good to me. Let's do it. Check here. And once again, just to reiterate, we're always solving for accuracy. You notice, like, I'm not trying to move until I'm certain of the solution. That's how you get better at tactics. Don't worry about solving for speed. That will come in time. Solve for accuracy instead. Okay, white's playing some spite moves. And finally we get this checkmate. That's a nice one. I like that problem. Those quiet moves in the midst of an otherwise forced sequence are always hard to find and really satisfying when you get them. Okay, black's a move on this one. This looks like a mating net type of problem. Definitely, because g4 check is the obvious move. And after king here, we have rook takes h2 check, but he escapes to this square. So thinking backwards about this, because you can often solve tactical dilemmas by thinking backwards. So if we start with g4 check, king here, what if I play king h6 in order to threaten rook takes h2 checkmate? So I'm taking away one of his flight squares. What could he do about that? He could play pawn h3 at that point, but still rook h2 comes all the same, and there's no defense to rook takes h3. So I think the crucial line would be g4 check, king h4, king h6, and then rook h1 immediately. So defending that pawn. What could I do then? Could I play bishop b6, trying to come to d8 at that point? That's nifty. And his king is so trapped in, he doesn't have anywhere to go with it. He could play f5, intending bishop d8 check f6, but then I bring the bishop back to e3, and there's no defense to bishop g5 checkmate. So let me clear those arrows. Oh, and let me know, by the way, whether you guys prefer these with or without the arrows. I'm kind of trying to do both at the moment. So g4 check, king h4, king h6, threatening rook takes h2 checkmate. So rook h1 to defend, and then this retreating move bishop b6, now that the rook is no longer protecting that square. The threat is bishop d8 checkmate. As far as I can tell, f5 is the only way to parry that threat, so that if bishop d8, there's f6. But f5 weakens that diagonal that our bishop was just on, so we can move the bishop back to e3, and bishop g5 is coming. This all looks good to me. So let's do it. Yep, rook h1 is planned, and now this guy. Okay, yep, f5 was the only move to stop it. Now we come right back to e3, and we get this nice checkmate. This is another little mini pattern that a good player will have in their arsenal of tactical patterns. So a rook on the second rank attacking a pawn, and the opponent's king like running up the board, because you can often get mating nets this way. So to calculate more efficiently, you have to get to the root of the problem really quickly, right? So like the very first line I looked at was g4 check, king h4, rook takes h2. That's obvious. You know, we just win a pawn, and possibly like not that bad for black, but the king escapes to g5. So if you want to streamline your calculations then and try to build off of lines that you previously calculated, you'll naturally want to think, how do I take away that g5 square from the king? Because I know that rook takes h2 is a good idea. And then we hit upon king h6, and everything starts falling into place from there. Okay, I think we got, what, 2 left? King h6 was just played. So white to move. Wow, black's king is in a rough spot right here. Knight f5 check suggests itself, but we lose the bishop in that case. We do have a bunch of discovered attacks after that. Like we can move this knight and go after the black king, but is it enough to win? So let's think. Knight f5 check, king takes g6, knight e7 double check. We like double check. If king f7, queen g6 looks utterly devastating. So I think they're forced forward, in fact, after the knight e7 move. So king h5. And then if queen to g6 check, king h4. I mean, black's got big threats of their own if we don't follow with checks. Like they're ready to play f2 check and unleash the queen. So queen g6 check, king h4, knight f5 check, taking away the g3 square. So king h3, and don't I have queen h5 mate then? That seems to be the case. Let's double check that line. So knight f5 check, they must take the bishop. Knight e7 double check, they must move the king. They can play king f7, but like I said, queen g6, and yeah, we're winning g7. It's mate on the next move, actually. King f8, bishop takes g7, checkmate. So knight f5 check, king takes g6, knight e7, double check, king h5. King h6, he gets mated on g6. So king h5, queen g6 check, king h4, knight f5 check. We're walking the king up the board. King h3, and then queen h5 mate. All these squares, g2 and g3 are covered. g3 covered by our knight, g2 covered by the king, our queen checking from h5. Black's knight's unable to assist. So I see a forced line. I'm happy with that. Let's do it. Double check. You see the power of that double check. That's always helpful. Yep, now queen h5 mate. Okay, so nice little king walk. And now we have our final problem. Black has just played rook e2, white to move. So there's kind of a pin going on. They're pinning our bishop on e3. The rook and the black bishop are attacking that bishop. So if we don't do anything, we're just going to go down a piece. We have some forcing moves. We have like rook h8 check. Queen takes g6, although we can rule that out in a split second. It's too much material. What is rook h8 accomplishing, if anything? They take it. I don't see a follow-up. I mean, queen takes g6, but we're losing everything. We can play a queen move to get out of the pin and also threaten checkmate. So I'm thinking maybe queen d5, trying to set up queen g8 mate, so he doesn't have time to take our bishop. What's up with that? So queen d5, they can throw in a check on e1, but we just escape here. That's nothing to be concerned about. Seems to me like they would be forced to play queen g7 pretty soon. So queen d5, king g7. Then what? I mean, you could take their bishop, but is it winning? Maybe not. Well, maybe we take the bishop, they take with the c-pawn, and then play rook b8, threatening rook b7, skewering the queen to the king. What kind of defense would they have against that? They could throw in a check on e1, either at that point after rook b8 or to begin with. But king h2, I don't think anything has changed. So again, what I'm looking at is queen d5 threatening mate on g8. So let's say queen to g7, and then a simple bishop trade. Bishop takes b6, c takes b6. And the reason why I want to do that bishop trade is because if we can get that pawn off of c7, the 7th rank is severely weakened. So then I'm thinking after c takes b6, playing rook b8, trying to go rook b7. And their rook and queen are separated. So that's why I think this is likely to work. I mean, even if rook f2 rather, trying to come back to f7 to guard, we have rook b7, and rook f7 doesn't work because our queen on d5, we can do rook takes f7. This is a rather long line, and it's kind of non-forced in the middle, so that makes me nervous. But I mean, queen d5 solves the bishop pin dilemma, and it threatens mate. And I don't see any other truly good forcing moves. Queen c4 is similar, but queen c4 I ruled out because they have d5, blocking our queen from communicating with g8. So queen d5, queen g7, bishop takes b6, c takes b6, rook b8. If check, king h2, rook f1, rook b7, and that's GG. Moreover, I think they can't really move their queen once I've played rook b8, because again, the queen is needed to defend g8. All right, bombs away. Let's pull the trigger on this and see what happens. So now we take. This is an elegant move. I like that move a lot. Rook b8. Yeah, and there's just no way that the rook can get back in time to guard the 7th rank. It's like I said, the f7 square was taboo. Yeah, now we just win the queen. Okay. So we did pretty well. We actually pushed our tactics trainer rating up a little bit. Not that I've been working super hard at this rating, but nice to see it go up. And we focused on solving for accuracy. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tactics training session. Please feel free to leave me any feedback if you have it. And thanks for watching, guys. Bye.